Snow swept across Winter Street as Sergeant Hollis Blackwood heard 3 faint knocks against the police station door. An elderly woman stood beneath the yellow porch light, holding a soaked German Shepherd puppy whose body had gone stiff from the cold. Hollis took the nearly weightless puppy into his arms, wrapped him in warm towels, and called the town veterinarian before his fading breaths could stop. As Dr. Iris Fenmore worked to stabilize him, Hollis discovered an old leather collar marked with the initials of his late wife. The woman had left behind one warning: never return the puppy to North Ridge, where vulnerable seniors were being separated from the animals they loved. Hollis saved the puppy that night, but protecting Gale would soon force him to uncover what safety truly meant. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe to K9 Justice Tales. Winter arrived early in Alder Wake, though no one in town seemed surprised by it. The mountains had been wearing white along their upper ridges for nearly a week, and the pines above the eastern road bent beneath fresh snow before the calendar had reached the middle of November. By late afternoon, the first serious storm of the season had settled over the valley, softening rooftops, burying fence posts, and turning the main street into a pale corridor of drifting light. At the far end of Winter Street stood the Alder Wake Police Department, a low brick building with a steep roof and narrow windows that fogged whenever the heat worked too hard. An old municipal maintenance garage sat behind it, unused except for broken shelving, salt bags, and a snowblower no one had managed to repair. Above the front steps, a yellow porch lamp burned through the storm. Sergeant Hollis Blackwood sat alone behind the oldest desk in the station. At 48, Hollis still carried the tall, broad-shouldered frame of a man who spent more time on patrol than in meetings. His dark brown hair was cut short and showed silver at both temples. A faint scar crossed his right eyebrow, and a day's worth of stubble darkened the straight lines of his jaw. His blue-gray eyes remained alert even when exhaustion settled into the rest of his face. He had volunteered for the evening shift without calling it volunteering. Deputy Mercer had children waiting at home. The dispatcher had a husband recovering from surgery. Hollis had a quiet house 4 blocks away, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, and no one who would notice whether he came home at 8 or midnight. He reviewed the final report from a minor collision near the school road. 2 vehicles, no injuries, one driver moving too fast for the conditions and another moving too slowly to avoid him. The facts fit cleanly into their boxes: weather, visibility, road surface, probable cause. Hollis appreciated forms because forms did not ask whether a person had slept badly. They did not notice when someone avoided a certain street because the medical clinic was on the corner. They did not look toward the metal cabinet beside his desk, where a framed wedding photograph lay face down neat beneath expired vehicle registration notices. Elowen had disliked that photograph. She had said the photographer made Hollis look as though he were guarding the church against armed invasion. Hollis had replied that Elowen appeared to be planning an escape through the stained glass window. She had laughed so hard that the photographer had threatened to start over. 18 months had passed since an aneurysm took her between breakfast and noon. There had been no long illness, no careful goodbye. No final conversation assembled with the knowledge that it would be final. She had left a mug beside the kitchen sink and a scarf over the back of a chair. Hollis had spent the first weeks afterward waiting for grief to become something more organized. It never had. On Saturdays, Elowen had volunteered at North Ridge Transitional Shelter, a converted motel at the edge of town that served older adults, displaced workers, and people who had nowhere else to sleep. She had repaired coat buttons, filled out benefit applications, cut dog leashes from donated climbing rope, and argued with anyone who treated kindness as a limited resource. She had once told Hollis that he trusted signatures too much. A signature only proves someone held a pen, she had said. It proves agreement. It can prove fear, exhaustion, confusion. That is why there are witnesses. That only proves 2 people were in the room. They had been standing in the kitchen, folding donated blankets. Hollis remembered being mildly irritated. Elowen had been smiling. They had never finished the argument. The station clock moved toward 10. Wind pushed snow against the front windows with a faint brushing sound. The radio remained quiet. Hollis closed the collision report, aligned it with the edge of the desk, and reached for the next file. 3 soft knocks touched the glass, not the hard pounding of someone in danger, not the impatient rattle of a resident wanting a complaint handled immediately. 3 careful taps. Hollis looked toward the entrance. A shape stood beyond the fogged window. He rose, took his winter patrol coat from the back of his chair, and crossed the small lobby. When he opened the door, the storm rushed inward, cold enough to sting his eyes. An elderly woman stood beneath the porch light. Hollis recognized her only after a moment. He had seen her at North Ridge when he dropped Elowen off on Saturday mornings. She had always sat near the end of the lobby, usually with a paper cup between both hands. Cora Madsen. She was 71, though the storm made her appear older. Her narrow body seemed almost weightless beneath a thin gray-purple wool coat. A burgundy scarf covered her neck and lower face. White hair had come loose from a braid over her left shoulder and clung wetly to her cheeks. In her arms was a German shepherd puppy. The animal was no more than 3 or 4 months old. Its coat was black and honeygold beneath the snow, though the fur had flattened against its ribs. The right ear lifted weakly, the left folded outward at the tip. Its large paws hung over Cora's forearm, motionless. "Come inside," Hollis said. Cora did not move. "Mrs. Madsen, you need heat. I went to your house first." Her voice was thin but steady. There was no light. Hollis stepped aside to clear the doorway. "Then you found the station." "The duty board is posted beside the window." Only then did he remember the weekly schedule visible from the lobby entrance. The puppy shifted once against her chest. A shallow breath moved through it. Hollis reached forward. "Give him to me." Cora's arms tightened. For one uneasy second, Hollis thought she might refuse. Then she looked down at the animal and seemed to make a decision that had already taken everything she possessed. She placed the puppy into Hollis's arms. The body was frighteningly light. Cold had stiffened the front legs, and the breath against Hollis's coat barely carried warmth. A worn leather collar circled the puppy's neck. The outside held the remains of a name too faded to read. Cora pushed a folded paper beneath the edge of the damp blanket. "Do not take him back to North Ridge." Hollis looked up. "Why?" "This is the last promise." "What promise?" Her eyes lifted to his. They were green-gray, alert despite the cold. "He belongs where someone still gets to choose." The puppy's head rolled against Hollis's chest. He pulled the blanket back to check its breathing. As he did, the collar twisted. Words had been carved into the inner leather. E.B. No one leaves alone. For a moment, the storm, the open door, and the woman before him seemed to move farther away. Hollis knew the uneven depth of those letters. Elowen had carved them with a small leather punch at the kitchen table. She had made a dozen collars for animals staying at North Ridge, complaining the entire time that Hollis's tools were designed by people who hated hands. He touched the edge of the leather with one gloved finger. "Where did you get this?" Cora stepped backward. "Who are you running from?" Hollis asked. She descended the first step. "Mrs. Madsen." The puppy gave a weak shudder. Hollis turned toward the lobby, intending only to place it beside the heater before following her. That choice cost less than 10 seconds. When he looked outside again, the porch was empty. "Cora." He carried the puppy to the bench beside the wall heater, wrapped the blanket more tightly, and grabbed the radio. He called for any unit near Winter Street, then remembered there were none. The nearest county deputy was assisting a stranded fuel truck 11 miles south. Hollis ran outside. Snow erased the steps almost as soon as he made them. He saw no figure on the road, no movement near the alley, no vehicle lights. The wind reduced the world to the yellow circle beneath the station lamp and a few black shapes of trees beyond it. He shouted her name twice. Nothing answered except the pines. Inside, the puppy's breathing had become irregular. Hollis shut the door and called Dr. Iris Fenmore. She answered on the 4th ring. "If this is about the deer behind the hardware store," she said, I already told animal control it is not drunk. It's a puppy. The humor vanished from her voice. How cold. Very. Do not put him directly against the heater. Warm towels. Gradually. I'm coming. Iris reached the station 20 minutes later in a brick-red parka, carrying a teal medical bag and snow in the loose curls around her face. She was 51, broad-shouldered and practical, with hazel eyes that missed very little. She knelt beside the puppy without immediately touching him. Male, she said. Young. Underfed. She checked the gums, pulse, temperature, and joints, moving slowly enough that each step seemed separate from the next. Hollis held warm towels while Iris administered fluids beneath the skin. No fractures, she said. No obvious internal injury. Dehydration. Mild malnutrition. Old abrasion around the neck. Will he live? Iris looked at him over the puppy's body. I think so. It was not a promise. Hollis trusted it more because of that. At the clinic, the microchip scanner found nothing. Iris contacted County Animal Control and registered the puppy as an unidentified animal surrendered under emergency circumstances. Hollis could provide temporary foster care after the mandatory hold began, but he had no legal claim. He isn't yours, Iris said as Hollis signed the form. I know. His hand paused over the line marked foster applicant. He signed anyway. The paper Cora had left was half of a relocation notice from North Ridge. Her name and case number remained intact. The departure date was 3 days earlier. The destination section had been torn away. At the station, Hollis reviewed exterior camera footage. The department camera showed only white static beyond the porch light, but the grocery store at the corner had a clearer angle down the rear lane. At 10:13 p.m., a municipal snowplow stopped behind the station. Hollis recognized the number and called the driver. Silas Dempsey answered with an engine rumbling behind him. At 63, Silas had cleared Alder Wake's roads for longer than some residents had been alive. Yes, Silas admitted. I picked up an older woman. Cora Madsen? She said she needed St. Rowan. Why didn't you call it in? She said someone was waiting. In this storm? She sounded certain. Silas's voice lowered. I thought I was helping. Hollis looked at the torn relocation notice. Did anyone meet her? I didn't stay. She told me not to. Hollis called St. Rowan Chapel. The telephone rang until the line disconnected. Near midnight, the puppy lay in a cardboard box at Iris's clinic, wrapped in old towels with a warming pad beneath one side. The right ear lifted whenever footsteps approached. The left remained folded outward. Hollis stood on the other side of the glass. The puppy opened amber-brown eyes and looked not at Hollis's face, but at the door behind him. Even half-conscious, it was watching the exit. What are you going to call him? Iris asked. He may already have a name. Then this can be temporary. Outside, wind struck the clinic windows hard enough to make them tremble. Gale, Hollis said. The puppy's right ear moved once. Hollis stayed until the breathing became steady. When he finally stepped back into the snow, the town was nearly invisible. His house waited 4 blocks away, empty and cold. The station waited in the opposite direction, full of unfinished reports and a wedding photograph. He had not turned upright in 18 months. For the first time, in longer than he could remember, Hollis was leaving work because something living would be waiting for him to return in the morning. By morning, the storm had not weakened. It had only become more deliberate. Snow pressed against the north side of the station in smooth white shelves, and the road through Alder Wake had narrowed to a single gray lane carved by municipal plows. The mountains beyond town had vanished entirely. Even the closest pine-covered slope looked like a charcoal smudge behind frosted glass. Hollis Blackwood filed Cora Madsen as a missing vulnerable adult at 6:12 a.m. The wording mattered. He did not list her as a runaway, a transient, or a person refusing services. She was 71 years old, inadequately dressed for the weather, last confirmed near an unoccupied chapel, and potentially exposed to dangerous cold. Her decision to avoid North Ridge did not make her disappearance less urgent. He sent the report to the county sheriff, the highway patrol desk, the hospital, and the 2 neighboring departments. Then he called Dr. Iris Fenmore. Breathing is steady, Iris said. Temperature is improving." He ate half a spoonful and looked offended when I stopped. Hollis stood beside the station window, watching a plow push snow past the courthouse. "That sounds promising. It sounds like a puppy." He could hear stainless steel cabinet doors closing in the background. "Can I take him with me later?" "Only if you stop pretending you are asking as a police officer." "I'm not pretending anything." "You are very bad at lying before coffee." Iris agreed to release the puppy under the emergency foster arrangement after another examination. She advised short, quiet exposure to unfamiliar places, provided the animal had access to distance and rest, no crowds, no forced introductions, no treating fear like disobedience. Hollis wrote the instructions on the back of an evidence envelope receipt. At 8, he drove north towards St. Rowan Chapel. The road climbed beyond the last cluster of houses, curving between snow-heavy pines and fields reduced to blank white plains. St. Rowan stood on a low rise overlooking the frozen creek. The chapel's narrow steeple leaned slightly west, and blue tarps had been tied across part of the roof where autumn wind had torn away shingles. The front doors were chained. Hollis followed fresh shovel marks around the side and found a lower entrance beneath a wooden awning. Before he knocked, the door opened. The woman behind it wore a cobalt sweater beneath a quilted camel coat. She was short and full-bodied, with warm brown skin, silver curls cropped close to her head, and round glasses in dark red frames. A ring of keys hung from one hand, carrying a small brass bell that sounded whenever she moved. "You are late," she said. Hollis checked his watch. "We did not have an appointment. The storm made one." Reverend Mabel Arkwright had retired from active ministry 3 years earlier, but apparently no one had informed St. Rowan. She still maintained the food pantry, emergency blankets, and the lower fellowship room beneath the damaged chapel. The room behind her smelled of canned tomatoes, old hymnals, and wood heat. Hollis showed her Cora's photograph. Mabel's expression changed before she spoke. "She was here when, about 11 last night, half frozen and twice as stubborn as anyone should be at her age. Is she still here?" "No." Mabel led him downstairs. A narrow cot stood near an iron stove. A burgundy scarf had left a few loose fibers on the folded blanket. "She ate soup," Mabel said. "Wouldn't take off her boots. Wouldn't let me call an ambulance." "Did she say why?" "She said people kept confusing help with permission." Hollis looked at the empty cot. "Did she mention Northridge?" "At length, but not clearly. She said they would come looking once they realized she had returned." "Who is they?" She did not provide a department chart. Mabel's tone was dry, but not evasive. She told him a dark passenger van had driven slowly past the chapel before dawn. Cora had recognized the Northridge emblem on its side and become frightened. Mabel had gone upstairs to check the road. When she returned, Cora was gone through the pantry exit. She left this. From the pocket of her coat, Mabel produced a torn strip of brown paper. 6 words had been written in shaky block letters. "Find the ones they sent before." Hollis read it twice. "You should have called us. I offered." She was endangered. She was also lucid enough to understand what I was asking. In weather like this, those are not opposing facts. "No," Mabel said. "That is what makes helping people difficult." The small brass bell on her keys gave a quiet sound as she folded her hands. "I checked the old bus shelter and the maintenance shed. She was not there. I called 2 people she trusts. Neither has seen her. I did not leave her to freeze, Sergeant. I chose not to turn one frightened woman into a prisoner because I was afraid of being blamed." Hollis felt the reply form in him and stopped it. Elowen would have liked Mabel. The thought arrived without warning and carried no comfort. He photographed the note, collected it with Mabel's consent, and arranged for county deputies to search the roads north of the chapel. Before leaving, he asked Mabel to contact him immediately if Cora returned. Mabel handed him a paper bag of biscuits. "For the dog. He is too young for those. They are for you. The dog has a veterinarian." Northridge Transitional Shelter occupied a former roadside motel at the eastern edge of Alder Wake. Its long, low buildings surrounded a plowed courtyard where 2 residents smoked beneath an awning. The property looked orderly from the road. Windows glowed warmly. A wooden sign near the entrance promised transition with dignity. Inside, the reception area was overheated and smelled faintly of bleach, coffee, and wet wool. Martin Quillen met Hollis in a small office behind the front desk. He was 56, thin through the shoulders, with a long face and tired brown eyes behind narrow metal glasses. His pale blue shirt sleeves had been rolled unevenly, and a gray sweater vest hung loosely from his frame. Martin knew why Hollis had come. "I heard she appeared at the station," he said. "She appeared, left a hypothermic puppy, and disappeared again." Martin took off his glasses. "Cora has been resistant to placement for months." Hollis remained standing. "Show me her file." Martin hesitated only long enough for Hollis to notice. The relocation packet was thick, clean, and carefully tabbed. Cora's signature appeared in 4 places. A shelter employee had witnessed each one. The form stated that she had received a full explanation of the Bright Basin Residential Transition Program. The time beside the final signature read 1:43 a.m. Hollis turned the page. The destination was listed only as BB27. No address. The lodge uses intake codes until arrival. No contact person. The receiving coordinator is assigned by schedule. Hollis found the animal section. Companion animal arrangements. Independently resolved by participant. What arrangement? Martin leaned back. Cora told staff she would place the puppy privately. With whom? That is not documented. Then how did your staff determine it was resolved? She signed the form. The answer rested between them with the dull weight of something both men understood differently. Martin replaced his glasses. She boarded the transport voluntarily. She left the vehicle at a fuel stop without notifying the driver. Bright Basin never received her. From our perspective, she abandoned the placement, and her bed? Reassigned the next morning. So after she stepped off the van, who was responsible for confirming she was safe? The transportation company records incomplete arrivals. That is not what I asked. Martin's mouth tightened. No single agency retains responsibility after a participant withdraws. Hollis looked down at the signature again. A person could disappear between 2 boxes on a form, provided each department checked its own. Martin stood and went to the window. In the courtyard, a man in a borrowed coat carried a plastic laundry basket through the snow. "You think I do not see the flaws," Martin said. "But if our average stay increases, the grant shrinks. If the grant shrinks, I close 1 wing. That is 28 beds. So you sign people out at 1 in the morning. We transport before dawn because Silver Notch becomes dangerous after the sun warms the lower ice. That explains the departure time. It does not explain the signature time. They need to complete paperwork before leaving. While tired, afraid, and being told their bed may not remain available." Martin looked at him. "Sometimes there is no kind version of limited capacity." Hollis closed the file. There it was. Not cruelty, not exactly. Something harder to confront because it wore the shape of arithmetic. He did not accuse Martin of a crime. He did not have one. Instead, he requested copies of Cora's paperwork, the transport manifest, and the name of every staff member present that night. Martin agreed, though his relief suggested he thought the conversation was over. It was not. Hollis changed out of uniform before speaking with former residents. He wore a gray Henley beneath an open green flannel shirt, brown work trousers, and his faded chore jacket. The badge stayed in his pocket. He made clear he was gathering background information for a welfare search, not conducting formal interviews. Lester Wren met him at a diner near the bus depot. At 68, Lester had the dense hands and bowed shoulders of a man who had spent decades underground. Gray hair grew unevenly around a deeply lined scalp, and coal dust seemed permanently embedded near the nails despite years away from the mines. "They called us complicated," Lester said over coffee. "Not to our faces. On the whiteboard, who was complicated? People with oxygen tanks, people who needed walkers, people with animals. Anything that made the next place say no. What happened to their pets? Depends who was working. Sometimes family came. Sometimes a volunteer took them. Sometimes they said a rescue would. Did you ever see the rescue?" Lester stared into his cup. I saw Vans. He gave Hollis the name of Bonnie Haskins, who lived with a cousin in a small duplex behind the tire shop. Hollis picked up Gale from Iris before going there. The puppy looked slightly less fragile beneath a borrowed charcoal gray harness, though his ribs still showed beneath the honey-colored fur. Iris had washed the mud from his coat, revealing the uneven black saddle across his back and the narrow gold mark between his eyes. His right ear stood. The left leaned outward as if unconvinced. "Do not let strangers crowd him," Iris said, "and do not use him to make people talk." I would not, I know. That is why I said it once. Bonnie Haskins answered her door in thick socks and a faded purple sweatshirt. She was 64, with iron-gray curls and a face that seemed prepared to apologize before anyone accused her of anything. Her cousin's living room contained too much furniture and no private corner. Gale stopped at the threshold. Hollis did not pull. After several seconds, the puppy stepped inside and chose a place beside the wall where he could see the front door. Bonnie noticed the collar before she noticed Hollis's questions. "Alawan made those," she said. "You knew her?" "She fixed my cat's carrier with wire and complained about the design for 20 minutes. The memory brought a small smile. It disappeared when Hollis asked about Bright Basin. Bonnie had surrendered her 12-year-old cat, Marbles, to a transport coordinator who promised a temporary foster placement. She had signed at 12:18 a.m. The van left before 3. "When I reached the lodge, I asked for the rescue number," Bonnie said. "They told me Northridge handled animals. Northridge told me Transport handled it. Transport said the coordinator was independent. What happened to Marbles? I don't know." Her hands began to shake. She pressed them against her knees, but the movement climbed into her shoulders. Her breathing shortened. Words came faster, each one trapping the next. "They said I had agreed. They kept showing me the page. I know my signature. I know what it looks like. I just don't remember agreeing to never see her again." Hollis started to move forward, then stopped. Gale rose. The puppy did not approach Bonnie. He crossed halfway into the room, lowered himself to the carpet, and turned his body sideways. His gaze moved to the front door, not to her face. Bonnie watched him. Her breathing remained uneven, but it began to slow. "He doesn't like doors," she whispered. "Not yet. He thinks someone will close it." Hollis looked at the puppy lying between them. "Maybe." Bonnie wiped her eyes with the heel of one hand. Without being asked again, she stood, went to a drawer, and returned with a folded relocation packet. She had kept every page. At the top of the final sheet, a blue stamp declared, "Successful transition, placement completed." Bonnie gave a short, broken laugh. "I slept in my cousin's garage for 3 months. That afternoon, Hollis took the documents to the county sheriff. He did not present a theory. He presented times, missing addresses, inconsistent responsibility, and a vulnerable woman still unaccounted for. He also disclosed Alawan's past work at Northridge, Cora's personal connection to him, and his foster status with Gale. The sheriff listened, then assigned Detective Brooke Lennox. Brooke arrived before dusk carrying a mustard-yellow waterproof document bag. She was 43, compact and steady, with olive-toned skin, dark eyes, and black hair cut in a short bob, held back on one side by a plain metal clip. She read Cora's form, Bonnie's packet, and Mabel's note without offering sympathy or outrage. Finally, she capped her pen and aligned it with the edge of the table. "This is troubling," she said. Martin used the same word. "It remains accurate. Is it illegal? I don't know." Hollis leaned back. Brooke continued, "A bad outcome is not automatically fraud. A late signature is not automatically coercion. A missing address may violate policy without violating criminal law. So what do we need? Evidence that someone knowingly misrepresented where people were going, falsified results, misused funds, or created immediate danger. And we need witnesses interviewed by someone who is not connected to the shelter through his dead wife and currently housing the dog at the center of the complaint." The bluntness landed cleanly. "You are removing me. I am preventing a defense attorney from doing it later." Hollis looked toward Gale, asleep beneath the conference table with one eye partly open. Brooke followed his gaze. "You found the first loose thread," she said. That does not mean you should pull the entire building down yourself. That night, Hollis brought Gale home. He placed a new dog bed near the kitchen radiator, far enough from the rear door to avoid drafts. Gale sniffed it once, circled the room, and lay down against the threshold instead. From there, he could see the hallway, the kitchen, and the narrow strip of darkness beneath the door. Hollis sat at the table without calling him closer. He had spent the day looking at records that claimed people were safe because they were no longer present. Gale made the flaw visible without a single document. The puppy had entered the house. That did not mean he believed he had arrived. Detective Brooke Lennox began with documents because documents could not be embarrassed, intimidated, or persuaded to remember differently. By Monday morning, the conference room at the county sheriff's office had become a paper landscape. Funding agreements occupied one end of the table. Transportation contracts were stacked beside room assignment reports from Bright Basin Lodge. A whiteboard held dates, names, departure times, and outcome codes written in Brooke's precise block lettering. Hollis sat only long enough to answer questions about what he had personally observed. Where had he found Gale? Who had surrendered the puppy? What exactly had Cora said? Which papers had been in the blanket? Had he promised anything to Bonnie Haskins before she produced her records? Brooke separated each answer from interpretation. Whenever Hollis said something seemed designed to pressure residents, she asked what words, timing, or action supported that conclusion. It was not distrust. It was discipline. When the interview ended, Brooke closed her notebook. "You are done asking witnesses questions for now. I understood that yesterday. You understood it emotionally. I am making sure you understand it procedurally." Hollis stood. "What do you want me doing? Find people. Drive them here. Keep them warm. Do not explain the case to them before I speak with them. That sounds like transportation." "You are very qualified." The corner of Brooke's mouth moved, though not enough to become a smile. The County Office for Vulnerable Adult Protection sent Marion Valehart that afternoon. She arrived without urgency and made the room adjust to her pace. Marion was 53, broad-faced and steady, with brown-red hair threaded with silver and cut in soft layers around her neck. Reading glasses hung from a thin cord against her chest. A worn leather bag rested at her hip, heavy with forms, a blood pressure cuff, and the accumulated practicality of years spent entering homes where people insisted everything was fine. Before joining the discussion, she asked whether Cora's missing person status remained active. "Yes," Brooke said, "and if she is found." "Medical assessment first, criminal interview only with her consent unless there is immediate danger." Marion nodded. Then she opened Cora's relocation packet and read the signature page. "A person may understand every word on a form and still not be making a free decision," she said. Hollis leaned against the filing cabinet. Because she was tired? Tired, cold, afraid, dependent on the person presenting the choice, worried that refusal will cost her something essential, but the signature is still hers. "Yes," Marion looked directly at him. "That is why this is difficult. Invalid consent does not always look like incapacity. Sometimes it looks like a capable person choosing between two unacceptable outcomes." The phrase stayed with Hollis after the meeting. Two unacceptable outcomes. A bed without the animal you loved, or the cold with it. A signature, or uncertainty. Safety defined by the person controlling the keys. Brooke requested 12 months of Northridge performance reports, Parnell Transit invoices, and Bright Basin occupancy records. What returned was not dramatic. There were no secret accounts marked fraud, no handwritten order to remove difficult residents, no single payment tying every institution together. Instead, the structure emerged gradually. Northridge received a renewable grant based partly on how quickly beds became available for new residents. Longer stays lowered its performance score. Higher turnover improved it. Parnell Transit held a fixed county contract, but supervisors and drivers received completion incentives for routes that departed on time and reached their designated intake points with the listed passengers. Bright Basin Lodge was paid for reserved room blocks. If 6 rooms had been booked for a transport, the lodge invoiced 6 rooms even when 2 residents left after the first night. The county's definition of successful relocation required only confirmation that a participant had arrived. There was no mandatory 3-month check, no 6-month check, no requirement to confirm whether the person still had housing, medical access, or the animal listed on the original intake record. The system did not need villains meeting behind a locked door. It needed only separate offices rewarded for different versions of completion. North Ridge wanted an empty bed. Parnell wanted a finished route. Bright Basin wanted a filled invoice. The person being moved existed in all 3 systems for less than a day. After that, the numbers became cleaner without them. Martin Quillen returned to the sheriff's office at Brooke's request. He carried 2 binders and looked more exhausted than he had at North Ridge. The collar of his pale shirt had softened, and a gray shadow had formed along his jaw. Brooke asked him to explain the performance measures. Martin did not deny them. "If our average stay exceeds the grant standard, we lose points," he said. "Lose enough points and the next renewal decreases." "How much?" "Potentially 20%. "What does that mean in practical terms?" "1 wing closed. Fewer overnight staff, reduced meals." Brooke tapped the report. "So departure volume affects survival." "Everything affects survival. Does resident stability after 3 months affect your score?" Martin's eyes moved to the page. "No." 6 months? No. Whether they retain access to medication. That falls under receiving services. Whether they remain housed. Bright Basin files outcome reports. Brooke slid one across the table. The form contained only 2 boxes. Arrived. Did not arrive. Martin removed his glasses. "It was not designed to be permanent housing," he said. "It is a transition point." "Transition to what?" "Regional placements, family reunification, assisted living openings." "Do you track which one occurs?" "Not consistently." Hollis watched Martin press a thumb into the bridge of his nose. There was no satisfaction in seeing him cornered. Martin did not look like a man protecting profit. He looked like someone who had spent years translating human need into terms a grant committee would approve, until the translation became the only language he trusted. "If I keep someone at North Ridge for 6 months because no perfect placement exists," Martin said, "another person sleeps in a car. You want me to pretend that choice is harmless?" "No," Brooke said. "I want you to stop pretending the other choice is." For the first time, Martin had no prepared answer. The most troubling pattern appeared 2 days later. Brooke separated all relocation forms involving companion animals. There were 29 files over 11 months. 17 had been signed after 10 at night. 9 had been signed after midnight. 23 used the same sentence. Participant has independently resolved companion animal arrangements. None identified a receiving shelter, foster family, veterinarian, or relative. Hollis stood beside the whiteboard while Brooke circled the repeated language. "That sentence was copied, likely from a template," she said, "which means staff expected the problem. It means they created a standard phrase to avoid documenting where the animals went, possibly." Brooke placed the marker down. "You keep reaching the correct concern faster than the evidence can support it." "You think I'm wrong?" "I think being right too early is one of the easiest ways to damage a case." The restraint in her voice irritated him because he knew it was necessary. That afternoon, Hollis drove Gale to Iris's clinic for a follow-up examination. The puppy had gained nearly 4 pounds. His movements no longer carried the careful weakness of the first night, though his oversized paws still made corners difficult. The honey-colored fur beneath his chest had begun to thicken, and the black saddle along his back showed an uneven edge that dipped lower on the left. Iris listened to his heart, checked the abrasion beneath his collar, and offered a small piece of food from an open palm. Gale waited until her hand was resting on the floor before taking it. "He is learning," Hollis said. Iris watched the puppy chew. "He is identifying rules." "Same thing." "No." She stood and crossed to a metal cabinet. "Learning means discovering what produces safety, reward, or connection. Identifying rules can mean discovering what prevents punishment." The cabinet door slipped from her fingers and struck the frame with a sharp metallic bang. Gale dropped flat. The movement was instantaneous, chest to floor, ears pinned, front legs pulled beneath him, his eyes fixed upward while his body became motionless. Hollis froze. Iris did not approach. She lowered herself onto a stool several feet away. "There," she said quietly. "That is not surprise." Gale remained pressed to the floor. Hollis crouched, but Iris lifted one hand. "Do not ask him to come. He knows me. That is not the same as being able to move." Minutes passed. The clinic's heater clicked softly. Somewhere in the rear room, a dog shook its collar. Gale's right ear rose first. The left followed halfway. He stood, crossed to Hollis, and stopped beside his boot without touching it. Hollis kept his hands still. The trust in that moment was not dramatic. Gale had not run into his arms or looked at him with gratitude. He had chosen the nearest place that felt less dangerous than the rest of the room. That choice carried more weight than obedience. The former Parnell driver came in on Thursday. Orson Ketter chose a booth at a 24-hour cafe outside town rather than the sheriff's office. He was 45, with narrow shoulders, a weathered face and hair cut so close it revealed a pale scar near the back of his head. His hands moved constantly around an untouched coffee cup. Brooke placed a recorder on the table but did not activate it. "You contacted us," she said. Orson nodded. "What made you leave Parnell?" "They said I falsified mileage." "Did you?" "I rounded it. That was not my question." Orson looked toward the window. "Yes." Brooke waited. The admission seemed to settle him. He explained that drivers were not paid per passenger, but incomplete routes reduced monthly performance bonuses. If a resident changed their mind before departure, supervisors wanted the seat filled. If a person stepped off during the route, the driver was expected to persuade them back aboard. "What words were you told to use?" Brooke asked. Orson's thumb rubbed the paper seam of the coffee cup. "Nothing written." "What did supervisors say?" "That people panic before change, that we were supposed to remind them what refusing meant." "What did refusing mean?" "They might lose the bed. They might wait months for another placement. Weather might close the pass." "Were those statements true?" "Sometimes. And when they were not," Orson's gaze lowered, "they sounded true." Hollis did not speak. Brooke had warned him not to. Orson described one elderly man who asked to remain at North Ridge because his dog had begun vomiting. A supervisor told him the room had already been reassigned, and the next transport might not permit animals at all. The man boarded. "Was the dog treated?" Brooke asked. "I don't know." "Where was it taken?" "I don't know." "Did you ask?" Orson's hand stopped moving. "No." He had never seen anyone dragged aboard. He had never witnessed a weapon, a threat of arrest or physical restraint. What he had witnessed was pressure disguised as helpful certainty. Brooke switched on the recorder only after Orson agreed to provide a formal statement. Hollis left before the interview ended. At home, Gale had begun following him from room to room. Not closely. The puppy maintained a distance of several feet, appearing in doorways whenever Hollis moved out of sight. Hollis tested a red rubber ball in the kitchen. He rolled it gently across the floor. Gale watched it pass, then looked toward Hollis as if waiting for the consequence. Hollis rolled it again. The puppy stepped away. The reaction unsettled him more than fear would have. A frightened dog understood that something was dangerous. Gale seemed to believe every object might be an instruction he had not yet learned. Hollis left the ball beside the wall. That evening, he went to the upstairs closet and brought down the last unopened box marked Ellen, North Ridge. He had avoided it because shelter work had belonged to the version of his wife that still moved through town without him. Opening the box felt less like reviewing belongings than entering a room she had not invited him into. Inside were donated pet intake cards, unfinished leather tags, meeting agendas, and 3 notebooks. Hollis opened the oldest one, expecting criticism of the relocation program. Instead, he found its beginning. Elowen had helped design the original pilot. Her early notes were hopeful and exact. The program would move residents from temporary shelter into stable placements. Every participant would receive follow-up calls. At 30 days, 3 months, and 6 months. Companion animals would remain with their owners whenever possible, and no separation would occur without a named plan approved by the owner. Hollis read the pages twice. Anger arrived before grief. It felt irrational and intimate, as if Elevin had concealed a betrayal from him rather than participated in a public program he had never bothered to understand. He had spent 18 months preserving her as the morally certain half of their marriage. Elowin had cared, Hollis had enforced. Elowin had questioned, Hollis had trusted rules. That arrangement had made mourning simpler. The notebooks ruined it. She had helped build the structure. She had believed forms could protect people too. Hollis closed the first notebook hard enough that Gale lifted his head from the kitchen doorway. The puppy did not retreat, but his body tightened. Hollis noticed and forced his hand to relax. "Not you," he said. Gale could not know the difference. Hollis opened the final notebook more carefully. The entries changed halfway through. The sentences shortened, questions crowded the margins. Why are 6-month contacts missing? Why do successful placements exceed lodge retention? Who verifies animal transfer? One page held a line underlined twice. The numbers are too beautiful. Farther in, Elowin had written, "An empty bed proves only that someone left. It does not prove they arrived somewhere safe. There was no confession, no hidden ledger, no list of criminals, only initials beside incomplete appointments, BH, LWCM. A draft policy requiring named animal placements. A meeting scheduled for the week after Elowin died." At the bottom of the final written page, one sentence stopped halfway across the paper. Success should be measured by whether a person still has. Nothing followed. Hollis sat at the kitchen table until the room darkened around him. Gale approached the red ball near the wall, sniffed it once and stepped over it. Then he crossed to the rear door and lay down facing the exit. Hollis looked at his wife's unfinished sentence. He had hoped the dead would tell him what had happened. Instead, Elowin had left him something far less comforting. Proof that she had begun to doubt the system too, and had run out of time before discovering what those doubts required of her. Mabel Arkwright called just after 7 in the morning. "She came back," she said, "and before you ask, no, she is not leaving again." Hollis was standing in his kitchen with one hand around a mug of coffee and the other resting near Gale's empty food bowl. The puppy had finished breakfast, carried 2 pieces of kibble beneath the table, and was now lying near the rear door with his right ear raised toward Hollis's voice. Is she hurt, exhausted, dehydrated, angry? That last one sounds stable. It is the healthiest thing about her. Mabel had already contacted Marion Veilhart. Hollis appreciated that. He appreciated even more that Mabel had called him only after ensuring Cora was warm, fed, and unlikely to disappear through another pantry exit. He left Gale with Iris for the morning and drove north through a sky that had finally cleared. Sunlight struck the snow hard enough to make the road shimmer. After days of storm, Alder Wake looked newly constructed. White roofs, dark chimneys, and pine branches edged with silver. St. Rowan Chapel appeared almost peaceful from the road. Inside the lower fellowship room, Cora Madsen sat beside the iron stove with a blanket around her shoulders and both boots resting on a folded towel. Her burgundy scarf had been washed and hung near the chimney to dry. The braid over her left shoulder had partly unraveled, exposing the sharp planes of her face. She looked smaller than Hollis remembered. Not weaker, smaller. There was a difference. Marion sat across from her with her glasses hanging unused against her blouse. A blood pressure cuff lay open on the table. Mabel stood near the stove, ladling soup into a bowl despite Cora's repeated insistence that she had already eaten. Brooke remained near the far wall, her recorder still inside the mustard-colored document bag. No one had begun without Cora. Hollis removed his coat. Cora looked at him first. How is the dog? Alive, eating. Stealing food from his own bowl and hiding it, her mouth shifted faintly. June's dogs always hid things. June, my sister. Marion leaned forward slightly. Cora, before anyone asks about North Ridge, I want to confirm something. Do you understand where you are and why these people are here? I am in the basement of a church that should have fixed its roof 10 years ago. Mabel turned from the stove. 7. And the police want to know why I did not remain on a van headed somewhere no one could clearly name. Marion nodded. Do you want to speak with them? I want to speak for myself. Do you want anyone to leave? Cora looked at Hollis. No, but if he interrupts, I may change my mind. Hollis took the chair nearest the door. Brooke placed the recorder on the table but did not switch it on. Tell us when you want the formal statement to begin, she said. Cora glanced toward the machine. After I finish the soup. I have learned not to make decisions while hungry. Mabel set the bowl before her without comment. The story began slowly. June Vadson had been 6 years younger than Cora and, according to Cora, incapable of passing an animal in need without making it everyone else's problem. She had worked seasonal laundry jobs, cleaned motel rooms, and lived for years between rented trailers, spare rooms, and shelters. By the time she reached North Ridge, she owned almost nothing except a canvas bag, 3 sweaters, and an elderly German shepherd named Ansel. June had found Ansel behind a grocery loading dock years earlier. No chip, no collar, 1 injured paw. The dog had remained with her through 2 evictions, a hospital stay, and the winter their trailer furnace failed. She did not call him an emotional support animal, Cora said. She called him family. Everyone understood that before paperwork started improving language. North Ridge's original pet area had been small but functional. 6 kennels beneath an insulated awning and a fenced strip beside the laundry building. Elowen had helped organize food donations and made identification collars from scrap leather, supplied by a saddle shop. The old collar Gale wore had first belonged to Ansel. After Ansel died, June kept it hanging above her bed. Months later, she agreed to foster a pregnant shepherd whose owner had been hospitalized. The arrangement was supposed to last 2 weeks. The owner never returned, and the dog delivered 5 puppies in North Ridge's pet area. June's health declined that same winter. Cora paused, pressing both hands around the soup bowl. Pulmonary fibrosis, she said, she had known for years. She simply regarded diagnosis as an opinion. June died before the puppies were old enough to leave. North Ridge found homes for 4. Cora kept the smallest male because he had been born with 1 ear slow to rise and because June had called him the unfinished one. That was Gale, Hollis asked. Cora gave him a look. You were warned about interrupting. He leaned back. Cora had cared for the puppy in the shelter's animal area. The mother died from complications several weeks later. After that, Cora placed Ansel's old leather collar around the puppy's neck, even though it was too large. The letters belonged to Elowen, she said, but the promise belonged to June too. Hollis looked toward the recorder, still dark. He had spent 3 days treating the collar like a message sent specifically to him. It had not been. It had passed through other hands, other losses, other forms of loyalty. Elowen's name was only 1 layer in an object that had survived longer than any single owner. That realization unsettled him in a new way. The collar was not calling him back to his wife. It was carrying forward a promise she had shared with people he had never truly seen. When Cora finished eating, Brooke asked permission to begin recording. Cora agreed. 3 days before the storm, a North Ridge caseworker had told her that a place had opened at Bright Basin Lodge. The room was private, transportation was arranged, medical coordination would follow after arrival. What about Gale? Brooke asked. I asked before anything else. What were you told? That Pinecrest Animal Support would take him temporarily, 2 weeks, perhaps less. Then Bright Basin would arrange reunification. Were you given an address? No. A phone number? A first name? Cora's eyes narrowed. They said details would be finalized during transport. The paperwork had been presented shortly after midnight. Cora had been awakened from sleep and told the van needed to leave before weather closed the pass. She asked to wait until morning. The caseworker reminded her that Bright Basin could not hold the room indefinitely and that North Ridge had several people waiting for beds. Did anyone say you would be put outside if you refused? Brooke asked. No. Did you believe you would lose your bed? Yes. Why? Because they had already packed my things, the sentence altered the room. Brooke did not react visibly, but her hand stopped above the notebook. Who packed them? 2 staff members. They said it would save time. Cora's coat, medication, and personal papers had been placed in plastic bags before she signed the final form. Gale had been confined in a transport crate near the rear exit. No one threatened her directly. No one raised a voice. Each action simply made departure appear already decided. On the van, Cora sat behind the driver with Gale's crate secured in the cargo area. At the first fuel stop, she heard the driver speaking on the phone. "The dog gets dropped here," Cora said. He said the rescue vehicle was late and they could leave the crate with the station attendant. "Did he say Pinecrest?" Brooke asked. "No," he said. "They'll figure out the dog." The driver later claimed he had meant another employee would handle the transfer. Cora did not wait for clarification. When he entered the convenience store, she opened the side door, took Gale's crate and crossed behind a maintenance shed. She hid until the van left. From there, she traveled back toward Alder Wake in pieces, walking along service roads, accepting a short ride from a ranch couple, sleeping several hours inside an equipment shed, and eventually reaching town during the storm. "Why did you not contact police earlier?" Brooke asked. Cora looked at Hollis. "I did not know which police officer would see a woman refusing services and which would see a person making a decision. And Hollis? Elwyn gave me his card." Hollis remembered the old department cards he had left in a kitchen drawer. Elwyn used to take several at a time, claiming shelters needed numbers that answered after 5. "She said he was difficult," Cora continued, "but that he never let anyone sign a page they had not read." Mabel concealed a smile behind her cup. Cora had gone first to Hollis's house, no lights. At the station, she saw his name on the public duty schedule. After surrendering Gale, she intended to find Bonnie, Lester, and others who had passed through Bright Basin. She wanted to warn them that the animal transfer promises could not be trusted. Instead, her body failed before her intention did. She reached St. Rowan, rested, and left again at dawn because she believed Northridge's van had come for her. She spent 2 nights in a garden shed behind an abandoned property, then returned to the chapel when fever and weakness made further travel impossible. Marion arranged a medical examination at the county clinic. Cora resisted until Marion clarified that agreeing to treatment did not authorize anyone to return her to Northridge. "People keep attaching extra decisions to the one I actually make," Cora said. Marion nodded. "Then we will separate them." That afternoon, Marion brought a preliminary review of 7 older adults who had left Northridge with companion animals during the previous 6 months. The outcomes refused to form a clean story. 2 residents had been reunited with their animals after relatives intervened. One woman now lived in a supported apartment near Cheyenne and said the relocation program had changed her life for the better. Her terrier had traveled with her after Northridge found a verified foster family for 10 days. 2 residents had never located their animals. One had left Bright Basin after 3 nights and returned to a cousin's property. The 7th could not be reached, and no agency could confirm a current address. Brooke placed the list beside Cora's statement. "This matters," she said. "The program is not entirely false." Cora looked at her. "I never said it was. It helped at least one person, then learn what they did correctly for her." Hollis watched Brooke absorb that. A simpler witness would have wanted the entire system condemned. Cora wanted something more difficult, precision. She did not need the program to be evil. She needed it to stop calling every departure a rescue. Later, they met at Iris's clinic so Cora could see Gale. Hollis expected the puppy to recognize her immediately. He did not. Gale stood near the back wall of the examination room, now stronger on his legs, his narrow chest filling out beneath the honey-gold fur. When Cora entered, his ears lifted. He watched her face, then her hands, then the door behind her. Cora lowered herself into a chair. She did not call his name. She did not reach. Minutes passed. Gale stepped forward once and stopped. His nose tested the air. He advanced again, close enough to sniff the sleeve of Cora's cardigan. Cora kept both hands on her knees. The puppy moved in a small circle and lay down near her left boot, not against it, near it. Cora's eyes closed for a moment. Hollis felt relief, followed immediately by something he did not want to name. The emergency foster period would end eventually. Cora had cared for Gale before the storm. If she proved ownership and wanted him returned, Hollis had no moral right to confuse his attachment with entitlement. Cora opened her eyes. "I will cooperate," she told Brooke, "but I read every statement before I sign it. I attend every meeting where my choices are discussed. No one calls me confused because I disagree." Brooke nodded. "Agreed, and Gale remains where he is until the legal review is complete." Hollis looked at her. Cora met his gaze. "That is not the same as giving him to you." "I understand. Do you?" He looked down at Gale. "I am trying to." The puppy shifted closer to Cora's boot in his sleep. Before anyone could speak again, Brooke's phone vibrated. She read the message without changing expression, then asked Iris for a quiet office. The transport manifest had come from a Northridge employee unwilling to use official email. A van was scheduled to depart before dawn. 3 older passengers, 2 dogs. Both animals listed for transfer to Pinecrest Animal Support. Brooke entered the address into the state registry. The property was a warehouse outside Laramie. It had been closed for 8 months. Brooke Lennox did not raise her voice when Hollis suggested stopping the transport van. She simply looked at him across the county conference table and said, "No." The answer came so quickly that Hollis almost believed she had decided before he finished speaking. Outside, evening settled over Alder Wake in pale blue layers. Snowplows moved along the courthouse road, their amber lights sweeping across the windows. On the table between them lay the anonymous transport manifest Brooke had received from a Northridge employee. 4 passenger names, 2 dogs, departure scheduled for 4:20 a.m., destination, Bright Basin Lodge, animal transfer, Pinecrest Animal Support. The listed Pinecrest address belonged to a warehouse that had been vacant for 8 months. "We know the address is false," Hollis said. "We know it is inactive. There is a difference without a distinction. There is a difference a judge cares about." Brooke slid the manifest into her mustard yellow document bag. "We verify before we act. State police handle the commercial stop. Transportation enforcement checks the vehicle. Marion assesses the passengers. You provide local support and terrain knowledge. And if the van leaves before everyone finishes coordinating, then we use whatever lawful authority exists at that moment." Hollis stood with both hands resting on the table. 3 vulnerable adults are being taken across a mountain pass in a storm. "Yes, and 2 dogs are listed for delivery to nowhere." "Yes." Brooke met his eyes. "That still does not give you permission to turn a suspicion into a roadblock." The restraint in her voice made the warning harder to dismiss. Hollis had spent years believing hesitation created danger. Brooke understood that haste could destroy the only tools capable of stopping it permanently. He stepped back. "What do you need from me?" "Call Iris. Ask whether she can hold 2 animals if the transport is suspended. She has an emergency surgery tonight. Then ask what backup exists." Brooke took out her phone. "I am contacting State Patrol and the Vulnerable Adult Office. Marion will try speaking to each passenger before departure." Northridge answered Marion's first call at 9:14 p.m. The 3 listed residents were resting in preparation for travel. Her request to speak with them was denied because staff did not want to create anxiety before a long journey. The second call received a different explanation. The residents had already begun intake procedures and could not be interrupted. At 11:03, Northridge confirmed that the van had arrived early. Marion asked whether any passenger wished to delay departure. The staff member said no one had expressed an objection. "Did you ask them separately?" Marion said. The line went quiet. Then it disconnected. By midnight, the National Weather Service had upgraded the mountain warning. Heavy snow and wind were expected over Silver Notch before dawn. Vehicles carrying multiple passengers were required to use chains beyond the east inspection point. Transportation enforcement found another issue. Parnell Transit had registered the van as a private, non-commercial passenger vehicle. Its county contract described it as transportation for supported relocation services. The classification did not automatically prove illegality, but it allowed state officers to inspect its passenger authorization, safety equipment, and insurance status. Brooke finally looked at Hollis. Now we have a lawful stop. Not an arrest, not a seizure. A stop. The distinction should have felt small. It did not. Iris could not take Gale overnight. A ranch dog had arrived with a twisted stomach, and she expected surgery to last until morning. The county animal facility was closed, while the on-call officer was responding to livestock exposed after a barn roof collapse. Gale could not yet remain alone for long without becoming distressed. He still woke when Hollis left a room and paced if the rear door closed between them. So Gale rode in the secured rear compartment of Hollis's patrol vehicle, wearing his charcoal harness and attached to a fixed safety line. A folded blanket covered one side of the crate to reduce passing light. "You stay in the vehicle," Brooke told Hollis before they left. "I know. I was talking about the dog." Hollis looked toward the back. Gale's right ear stood above the edge of the blanket. The left leaned outward. "He is not a police dog," Brooke continued. "He is not evidence equipment, not a calming tool, and not a reason to improvise. I know that too." Brooke studied him for a moment. "Good." The convoy left Alder Wake at 2:45 a.m. A state patrol SUV led, followed by transportation enforcement, Marion's county vehicle, and Hollis's cruiser. Snow had not yet begun, but the sky carried the dull copper color that came before a winter front. Headlights moved over black pines and empty ranch gates. Silver Notch began 12 miles east of town. The road rose through a narrow basin before cutting along a steep mountainside, where wind regularly pushed drifts across both lanes. The chain-up area sat below the first serious grade, a wide turnout lit by 2 sodium lamps and a battered emergency phone. The Parnell van reached it at 3:38. The driver slowed when he saw the patrol lights, then pulled into the inspection lane without attempting to turn around. Hollis noticed that before anything else. No flight, no confrontation, no simple villain arriving, prepared to prove everyone right. The driver stepped out with both hands visible. Calvin Parnell was in his late 40s, broad in the waist, with sandy hair flattened beneath a knit cap and a trimmed beard showing gray around the mouth. His Navy company jacket was zipped to the chin. He looked irritated, cold, and genuinely confused by the number of officials waiting. "Is the pass closed?" he asked. The state trooper explained the safety inspection. Calvin produced his license, insurance card, and the passenger manifest. He answered questions without resistance until the transportation officer asked for the commercial operating authorization. "This is not a commercial route," Calvin said. "We are a contracted support service. You are transporting passengers under a county-funded agreement. We do this every week. That does not answer the classification." Brooke stood several feet away, documenting the exchange rather than controlling it. Hollis remained beside his cruiser. Inside the van, 3 faces watched through fogged windows. The manifest listed 4. Brooke asked Calvin where the 4th passenger was. He declined before departure. "Why is he marked on board?" Calvin examined the sheet. "Office error." "Was your pay adjusted for the incomplete route?" "My pay is not your concern. It may become relevant." The first snow began as fine grains moving beneath the lights. Marion approached the side door and requested private conversations with each passenger. Calvin hesitated. "They have already signed." Marion's expression remained calm. "I am not asking whether they signed. I am asking whether they wish to continue. They are going to lose their placement if we delay." Brooke looked at him. "Who told you that?" Calvin seemed to realize the sentence had revealed more than he intended. "It is a scheduled intake." "That was not my question." He opened the door. The van smelled of wet clothing, disinfectant, and overheated air. 3 seats had been fitted with thin blankets. Plastic bags containing personal belongings were stacked in the rear. Behind a divider, 2 animal crates occupied the cargo section. Marion spoke first with Miriam Coyle. Miriam was 74, small and neatly dressed despite the hour, with white hair pinned beneath a blue knitted cap. She carried a cloth handbag on her lap and kept one hand wrapped around the strap. "Is my dog coming to the room?" she asked before Marion finished introducing herself. "What were you told? That bright basin accepts him after 2 nights." "Who told you?" "The woman with the clipboard. Do you have that in writing?" Miriam searched her bag, then the pockets of her coat. "No. Would you have agreed to travel if your dog could not stay with you?" Miriam looked toward the cargo divider. "No." Walter Briggs sat behind her. At 69, Walter had a narrow, weathered face and hands stained with old engine grease. He wore an insulated work coat over a red plaid shirt. His answers were quieter. He understood that his dog would be separated. "For 2 days," he said, "and after 2 days, they bring him down." "Who?" Walter stared at the floor. "I don't know. Do you want to continue tonight?" He rubbed a thumb against the seam of his coat. "They said if I stayed, the room would be gone." "Your room at North Ridge?" "And maybe the bed, too." No one had explicitly told Walter he would be put outside. They had described limited capacity, a waiting list, and the uncertainty of another opportunity. The meaning had formed without needing to be stated. Elias Rourke sat in the final row. He was 77, tall even while seated, with loose silver hair and a navy overcoat buttoned incorrectly. His eyes were clear one moment and distant the next. Marion asked where he was going. "Denver," Elias said. "The manifest listed a destination west of Laramie." "Who is meeting you there?" "My brother." "Where does your brother live?" Elias smiled with sudden confidence. "He died in 1998. Marion did not correct him sharply. She asked about the date, his medication, and whether anyone helped him review the forms. Elias remembered signing something. He did not remember what. No legal guardian or designated support person appeared in his file. By then, snow had thickened, crossing the inspection lights at an angle. The transportation officer found no veterinary certificates for either dog, no transfer of ownership forms, no verified recipient contact. The Pinecrest telephone number led to an automated mailbox that did not identify an organization. Calvin insisted another driver would meet them at a fuel station beyond the pass. "What is the driver's name?" Brooke asked. "I was told someone would be there." "By whom?" "My dispatcher." "Call them." The dispatch line rang unanswered. A hard impact sounded from inside the cargo area. Then another. Miriam stood so quickly her handbag fell. "That's Tucker." The larger crate shook against its restraint. Inside, a black and brown shepherd mix threw itself toward the door, nails scraping metal. The second dog, a graying cattle dog, pressed into the rear corner of its crate. Calvin reached for the cargo latch. "Don't," Hollis said. The word came sharper than he intended. Everyone looked at him. Hollis lowered his voice. "Opening the crate while he is panicking could make it worse." The shepherd struck the door again. Hollis called Iris. She answered from surgery, her voice muffled behind a mask. "I cannot leave," she said. "Keep the crate secured, reduce visual pressure. No one reaches inside. I can send my technician, but she is 30 minutes out." Tucker's breathing became audible through the metal divider. Miriam began to cry. "He thinks I left him." Hollis looked toward his patrol vehicle. Brooke saw the direction of his gaze. "No, he does not need to approach the crate. No improvising. I can keep Gale outside at distance. If either dog escalates, I put him back immediately." Brooke's jaw tightened. The shepherd hit the crate again, harder. The state trooper looked to Brooke. "Your call on the animal situation. We can secure the area." Brooke turned to Miriam. "Has Tucker lived around other dogs?" "Yes. He likes them. He is afraid of vans." Brooke looked at Hollis. "Loose leash. 30 feet away. No approach. 1 minute." Hollis opened the rear cruiser door. Gale hesitated at the edge. Snow touched his muzzle. Engines idled nearby. The cargo van loomed beneath the lights. Hollis did not pull. He stepped back and waited. Gale climbed down. The puppy's body stiffened at the first metallic strike from the crate. His ears angled forward. Hollis led him no closer than the far edge of the turnout, keeping the safety line loose. Gale saw the van. He saw the open side door, the officials and Miriam standing with both hands over her mouth. Then he heard Tucker. Gale did not bark. He moved 2 steps into the snow, stopped and lowered himself onto his chest. His body turned sideways to the van. His gaze shifted away from the cargo door. For several seconds, nothing changed. Tucker struck the crate once more. Gale remained still. The shepherd's next movement was smaller, a scrape rather than an impact, then silence, not complete calm. Tucker still panted heavily, but he stopped throwing his body against the door. Miriam lowered her hands. "He sees him," she whispered. "Perhaps." Or perhaps Gale's scent, posture, and lack of pressure gave the frightened dog one less threat to process. Hollis did not make more of it than that. After a minute, Brooke pointed toward the cruiser. Hollis returned Gale without argument. The State Patrol suspended the journey based on unsafe operating conditions, inconsistent passenger documentation, and the absence of required animal transfer records. Transportation Enforcement issued a temporary out-of-service order pending review of the vehicle classification and insurance. Marion placed Elias under an emergency protective hold until his cognitive status and legal decision-making support could be assessed. Miriam and Walter were asked separately whether they wished to return to Alder Wake. Both said yes. That solved only the road. It did not solve the night. Northridge confirmed that their former beds had already been assigned. Martin argued that returning them without placement would create another emergency. For once, everyone agreed with him. Mabel opened St. Rowan's lower fellowship room for immediate shelter. The county emergency fund paid for 2 rooms at a family-owned motel near the hospital, one for Miriam and one for Walter. Elias was taken to the medical center for evaluation. Iris's technician transported Tucker and the cattle dog to the clinic, where they would remain under temporary protective care until ownership and travel plans were clarified. No one slept at the police station. No one was forced back into the same rooms where they had believed refusal was impossible. By sunrise, reporters had gathered near the county building. The first online headline read, "Local Sergeant Stops Secret Winter Expulsion." A second called Hollis a hero who had rescued 3 seniors and their loyal pets from a mystery van. Brooke showed him the article without comment. "That is not what happened," Hollis said. "No. There was no expulsion order. No. I did not stop the van. No." He looked at the photograph beneath the headline. Someone had taken it while he led Gale across the turnout. The image made it appear as though Hollis and the puppy had walked alone into the storm to confront the transport. Every agency, interview, document, and legal limitation existed outside the frame. Hollis should have felt only anger. Instead, beneath it, something warmer and more dangerous took shape. For one night, he had been present when the system failed to move forward. 3 people had remained where they could still be asked what they wanted. 2 dogs had not disappeared into an address no one could verify. The article was wrong about almost everything. But the part of Hollis that still checked locks twice and watched Gale sleep near the door began to wonder whether the wrongness mattered. If being present had prevented harm once, perhaps the only safe answer was to be present every time. Gale rested beneath Hollis's desk that morning, exhausted by the unfamiliar night. The puppy's head lay across Hollis's left boot. Hollis did not move for nearly an hour. Not because he wanted to wake the dog. Because some quiet part of him had begun to believe that if he stayed exactly where he was, nothing else could be taken. The investigation grew larger after Silver Notch, but it did not become simpler. State auditors arrived at Northridge with rolling cases, temporary access orders, and the particular patience of people accustomed to finding misconduct hidden inside ordinary accounting. Parnell Transit was ordered to produce route logs, driver bonuses, insurance classifications, and communication records. Bright Basin Lodge submitted occupancy reports that did not agree with its invoices. Some discrepancies were difficult to explain innocently. Rooms had been billed for residents who never arrived. Several departures had been counted as completed placements even when passengers left the lodge within 48 hours. Pinecrest Animal Support appeared on 6 transfer forms despite having no active license, no current address, and no verified staff. Those matters might become criminal. Most of the harm, however, existed in a less satisfying category: vague policies, incomplete explanations. Staff members who knew something felt wrong but continued because every alternative appeared to threaten someone else. No single document explained the whole failure. The system had not been built to make people disappear. It had simply learned to benefit when they did. Martin Quillen was suspended pending the audit. He met Brooke, Marion, and a state investigator in the county building without a lawyer, though Brooke advised him twice that he could request one. Martin wore the same thin metal glasses and gray sweater vest Hollis remembered from North Ridge. Without the shelter office around him, he looked smaller. "I knew late-night departures were hard on people," Martin said. "I knew the animal transfers were inconsistent." "Why continue?" the investigator asked. Martin rubbed his glasses with a handkerchief. "Because every quarter, I was shown what happened if turnover fell. Fewer beds, fewer meals, one overnight position eliminated, and what happened to the people being moved. I told myself the next program was responsible for them." Brooke sat across from him, still and unreadable. "When did you stop believing that?" Martin lowered the glasses. "I am not sure I ever believed it. I repeated it." The distinction carried more shame than a denial would have. Each compromise had created the next. A missing address became acceptable because the transportation company promised to confirm it later. A signature after midnight became necessary because the van arrived before dawn. A resident's fear became resistance to change. An animal without a documented destination became a problem someone else would solve. Martin had not decided one morning to become cruel. He had simply accepted enough smaller wrongs that cruelty no longer required a decision. Hollis heard about the interview from Brooke but did not attend. He had other things to occupy him. Gale's mandatory notice period was nearly complete. County Animal Control had published the required found animal notices and checked regional microchip databases, veterinary records, and missing pet reports. No owner had come forward. Yet the final adoption decision remained unresolved because Cora had cared for Gale before the storm, and the puppy's earlier ownership history was incomplete. Legally, Hollis remained a foster caretaker. The word began to irritate him. Temporary, conditional, revocable. He told himself his concern was practical. Gale needed stability. Moving the puppy again could deepen the behaviors Iris had already observed. A legal dispute would place him among unfamiliar people, unfamiliar rooms, and new rules. All of that was true. It was not the whole truth. 3 days after the Silver Notch story appeared in the newspaper, Hollis replaced the rear door lock. The old one still worked. It had never failed. He installed a heavier deadbolt anyway. Then he added a camera beneath the eave, positioned to cover the yard, driveway, and gate. When a delivery truck slowed near the house, Hollis reviewed the recording twice and wrote down the plate number before realizing the driver had been searching for the neighboring address. He began keeping Gale on a long line in the fenced yard. At first, the change seemed harmless. The leash was 30 feet long, enough for the puppy to move between the porch, woodpile, and far corner of the fence. Hollis clipped it to his own belt while doing chores so both hands remained free. Gale adjusted quickly. That encouraged Hollis to ask for more. Wait at the door, sit before the gate, come, sit again, stay, come again. The puppy obeyed the first request with the alert attention that had once impressed Hollis. On the second repetition, Gale glanced toward the yard. By the fourth, his movements slowed. "Come," Hollis said. Gale remained near the fence, nose lifted toward something beneath the snow. Hollis shortened the line. "Gale." The puppy turned. His head lowered slightly before he approached. Hollis felt relief. He mistook it for success. The pattern repeated over several days. Hollis extended training sessions, arguing that reliable behavior might one day save Gale from a road, a vehicle, or an open gate. When the puppy responded correctly, Hollis repeated the command to be certain. When Gale hesitated, Hollis became more precise. The leash grew tighter without Hollis noticing. Gale stopped carrying food beneath the kitchen table. He began eating quickly, watching Hollis between bites. The red ball remained untouched beside the wall. At night, he returned to sleeping against the rear threshold. Hollis noticed each change and found a separate explanation for it. The floor was cooler. The puppy was entering adolescence. The news coverage had brought unfamiliar vehicles through town. None of the explanations required Hollis to consider himself. One morning he found Gale digging at the far corner of the yard. The hole was shallow, no more than a few inches beneath the bottom rail. The frozen soil had bloodied one nail slightly. Hollis filled it with packed gravel and placed a concrete block over the spot. The following morning, Gale had begun another hole beside the block. Hollis stood over it with anger rising faster than the situation deserved. "You have an entire yard." Gale stepped back. "You have food. You have shelter." The puppy's ears tilted away. Hollis heard the words after he had spoken them. They sounded disturbingly similar to the language used by institutions defending choices made for other people. He did not yet understand that. He only clipped on the long line. Iris saw the change during Gale's next examination. The puppy entered the clinic willingly, but stopped when Hollis shortened the leash near the table. His shoulders lifted. His gaze moved from Hollis's hand to the hallway. Iris remained beside the counter. "How long are you training each day?" "2 sessions. How long?" 15 minutes, sometimes 20. For a puppy who understands the request after 30 seconds, he needs consistency. He has consistency. He also has people questioning where he should live. No one has attempted to remove him. That does not mean they will not. Iris studied Hollis rather than Gale. "You are preparing for a possible future loss by making his current life smaller." "I'm keeping him safe." "From what?" The answer arrived in several forms at once. From legal reversal. From an unlocked gate. From a stranger who saw the newspaper. From attachment that could be withdrawn by someone holding the correct page. Hollis said none of them. Iris gave him a name. Dr. Naomi Calderidge worked with high-drive dogs. Failed protection animals and dogs recovering from pressure-based training. She agreed to visit the house on Saturday. "She is not coming to decide whether Gale is dangerous," Iris said. "He isn't. She is coming to see whether you are frightening each other." Naomi arrived carrying no clipboard. She was 54, tall and broad through the shoulders, with short black curls heavily threaded with silver. A small round pendant rested above her olive Henley, and her gray utility vest contained treats she did not immediately offer. Gale watched from the rear doorway. Naomi entered sideways, chose a chair near the wall, and ignored him. "Show me an ordinary afternoon," she said. "There hasn't been one, then show me the current version." Outside, the sky was bright enough to turn the snow blue in the shadows. Hollis clipped Gale to the long line and walked toward the gate. "Wait." Gale waited. Hollis opened the gate, stepped through, and called him. Gale followed. "Sit." The puppy sat. Hollis walked several yards into the field, then called him back. Gale came immediately and stopped near Hollis's left knee. "Again," Hollis said. The puppy followed the second recall more slowly. Hollis sent him out once more. Naomi raised a hand. "Why? Why what? Why did you repeat it?" "To reinforce the response." "Was the first response incorrect?" "No." "The second?" "No." "Then what are you reinforcing?" "Reliability." Naomi looked toward Gale, who had turned his nose into the wind. "For whom?" Hollis felt his patience contract. "He is a dog. He needs to respond when called." "Yes." "Then I don't understand the objection. You are not teaching the behavior anymore. You are testing whether the relationship still obeys you." The words struck with enough accuracy to feel insulting. "He is not a relationship." Naomi remained calm. "He is a dog living in one." Gale moved toward the fence corner. The long line reached its limit and tightened. He stopped beside the concrete block, looking beyond it toward the open field. Naomi walked over but did not approach him directly. "He may not be trying to escape," she said. "He is digging under the fence. He may be trying to create the possibility of leaving. That is the same thing." "No, choice and action are not the same thing." Hollis folded his arms. He could reach the road, then build a safer boundary. "I built a fence." "You built a fence," attached a line and added concrete every time he showed interest in what was beyond it. He needs limits. Naomi looked at him. So do you. Hollis almost ended the session. Before he could, Cora entered through the double doors from the driveway. Brooke had brought her for the afternoon because Hollis was scheduled for a county meeting later. Cora took in the long line, the concrete blocks and Gale's lowered posture. What did he do, she asked. He keeps digging. Perhaps he dislikes your landscaping. This is not funny. No, Cora said. It is familiar. Hollis turned toward her. She stepped closer, the burgundy scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. You stopped a van because other people had decided what was best for us without asking properly. That is not what I am doing. You are choosing every doorway, every walk and every distance because you are afraid of what he might choose. He is a puppy, and I am an old woman. That did not make their decisions mine. The comparison angered him. You think I should let him run into the road? No. I think you should stop pretending the only alternatives are control or disaster. Gale stood between them, watching the movement of their hands. Cora lowered her voice. If you want him to stay, build a place he returns to. Do not build a place he cannot leave. Hollis looked toward the puppy. Gale had once watched every exit because no one had made staying safe. Now Hollis had given him warmth, food, and care, and then begun asking for proof that the gift had worked. That evening, Hollis removed the concrete blocks. The changes that followed were practical rather than dramatic. He hired a fencing contractor to bury reinforced wire beneath the perimeter. Silas Dempsey helped install a second gate near the driveway, creating a secure entry space, so one open latch could not lead directly to the road. Training sessions became brief. One correct response ended the exercise. Walks included stretches without commands. At trail junctions, Hollis allowed Gale to choose left or right when both routes were safe. Brooke watched Gale during long shifts. Cora spent afternoons with him at St. Rowan. The first time Hollis left Gale there, he remained parked outside for 12 minutes before forcing himself to drive away. At home, he stopped moving the dog bed away from the rear door. Weeks passed. The changes were small enough to be missed by anyone seeking a miracle. Gale began leaving pieces of food openly beside his bowl rather than hiding them. His movements around the kitchen became less watchful. Sometimes he remained asleep when Hollis entered the room. Then, Hollis's left work glove disappeared. He found it beneath the kitchen table. The next day it vanished again and appeared behind the curtain. A week later, he discovered it inside an empty cardboard box near the laundry room. Gale sat several feet away, wearing an expression of complete innocence. You understand, Hollis said, holding up the glove, that most criminals do not remain at the scene. Gale's tail moved once against the floor, not obedience, not fear, a joke. The town hearing took place in February. Cora spoke first. Miriam, Walter, and Bonnie followed. Marion explained informed consent. Brooke presented no criminal conclusions, only verified patterns. Martin attended from the rear row but was not invited to speak on behalf of North Ridge. A woman named Evelyn Stokes also testified. At 70, she had entered the original relocation pilot with her terrier and now lived in a supported apartment near Cheyenne. The program helped me, she said. That is why you should repair it instead of pretending every outcome was the same as mine. Her testimony prevented the hearing from becoming a simple public condemnation. Elowen's notebooks were referenced only to establish what the original pilot had intended. Named destinations, follow-up at 3 and 6 months, and no separation from an animal without a verified plan approved by the owner. No one claimed Elowen had predicted everything. She had helped build the first version. She had also begun questioning what it became. The council adopted changes within its authority. No relocation forms after 8 at night except medical emergencies. A minimum 24-hour review period. Independent support available to older participants. Verified names, addresses, and contacts for receiving facilities. Written consent and confirmed placement before separating companion animals. Follow-up at 3 and 6 months. Most importantly, North Ridge's local performance measure would no longer count an empty bed as success by itself. The state investigation continued. Bright Basin faced possible fraud charges. Parnell's contract remained suspended. No resolution arrived cleanly or all at once. After the vote, Hollis returned home and found Gale asleep beside the rear door. The left glove rested beneath the puppy's chin. Hollis sat on the floor several feet away. Gale opened one eye, lifted the glove, and carried it behind the sofa. Hollis laughed. The sound surprised him. For months, he had believed safety meant preventing every departure. Gale was teaching him something harder. A door could remain visible, a leash could remain loose, and someone could still choose to come back. The idea began with a building no one wanted. Behind the Alder Wake Police Department stood the old municipal maintenance garage, a rectangular structure of weathered brick with 2 dented bay doors and windows painted shut decades earlier. It had once housed snowplows, road salt, spare tires, and tools that belonged to departments no one remembered creating. In recent years, it had become a place for broken shelving, expired traffic cones, and a furnace that worked only when kicked near the lower panel. After the Silver Notch transport was suspended, St. Rowan's Fellowship Room remained open for emergency shelter. Mabel kept folding cots along one wall, and the county paid for occasional motel rooms when vulnerable residents needed privacy or medical supervision. But the arrangement was fragile. The chapel could hold people for a night, perhaps 2. It had only 1 bathroom on the lower floor. The motel permitted small animals but refused large dogs after a guest complained about barking. Northridge had begun reforms, yet its sleeping rooms still did not allow companion animals inside. Everyone agreed the town needed something better. Agreement did not produce a building permit. Hollis presented the garage proposal at a council work session in March. He brought photographs, floor measurements, and a drawing made on graph paper. The plan showed 4 small rooms, a common kitchen, separate ventilation for an animal area, and a fenced yard behind the building. The fire marshal studied it for less than a minute. No second exit. We can add one. Electrical system predates the current code. We replace it. No accessible bathroom. We build one. The town's insurance representative turned to the next page. Shared property with an active police facility creates liability. The garage has its own road entrance. It still sits near weapons storage and secured records. A fenced service yard separates them. The building inspector tapped the paper. The furnace is unsuitable for residential use. Hollis felt his patience tighten. Then tell me what would make it suitable. The inspector leaned back. That is not a small list. Give me the list. The council denied the first proposal, not permanently, not with contempt. It was simply incomplete, underfunded, and unsafe. Hollis left the meeting carrying the same graph paper he had brought in. A year earlier, he might have interpreted the rejection as proof that no one cared enough to act. Instead, he went to Brooke. She read the council notes and circled 3 sections. You proposed a shelter owned and operated through the police department. It is behind the station. That is geography, not governance. Someone has to be responsible. Yes, more than one person. Brooke suggested creating an independent nonprofit to operate the facility. Mabel knew a regional housing organization willing to provide administrative support. Marion drafted intake procedures for vulnerable adults, including medical referral rules, privacy protections, and limits on how long someone could remain without a formal housing plan. Iris redesigned the animal section after rejecting Hollis's first version. You drew 6 kennels in 1 room, she said. That is efficient. It is also loud, stressful, and impossible if one dog is ill. She divided the space into smaller enclosures with washable barriers, separate airflow, and a temporary isolation area. No animal is housed without its owner nearby unless medical care requires it, she said, and no volunteer feeds someone else's dog because they feel sorry for it. Cora supported that rule immediately. People mistake interference for affection, she said. The planning meetings moved from the station to St. Rowan because Mabel refused to let the police conference room become the center of every decision. Former Northridge residents were invited before the final design was approved. They changed more than Hollis expected. Bonnie requested locks on the bedroom doors. "Inside locks?" the architect asked. "Inside and outside," she replied. "I want to secure my room when I leave, and I want to know staff cannot enter while I sleep unless there is an emergency." Walter asked for hooks near the beds, so people would not have to leave coats and leashes on the floor. Miriam wanted the common kitchen to remain open at night. "Some of us wake at 4, she said. Being told when coffee becomes available makes a place feel more temporary than it needs to. Cora demanded a written rule prohibiting residents, volunteers, or staff from touching another person's animal without permission. "What if a dog appears friendly?" one council member asked. "Then admire it from a respectful distance." They discussed quiet hours, medication storage, visitors, alcohol, service animals, frightened animals, aggressive behavior, and what happened when a resident broke a rule. The conversations were slow because everyone had learned what occurred when efficiency became more important than understanding. The second proposal returned to the council in June. This time, the garage would be leased for $1 a year to a newly formed nonprofit called Winter Street Community Housing. Its board would include a social worker, a town representative, a veterinary advisor, and 2 people with direct experience of homelessness. Hollis was not appointed chair. He was relieved and disappointed in equal measure. The financial plan came together in pieces. The county emergency warming fund covered the new furnace and accessible bathroom. The police union contributed toward electrical work. St. Rowan organized a winter supply drive. Local carpenters donated labor on weekends. A regional foundation offered a matching grant after Brooke helped complete the compliance documents. Hollis contributed money from an account he and Elowen had once called the Coast Fund. They had planned to drive west after retirement, rent a small cabin near the ocean, and spend 2 weeks learning whether either of them actually enjoyed doing nothing. The trip had remained in a shared spreadsheet long after Elowen died. When Hollis authorized the transfer, the bank clerk asked whether he wanted to close the account. He almost said yes. Instead, he left $100 in it. Not because he still expected the trip. Because finishing one promise did not require erasing another. Construction began in late summer. Silas repaired the bay doors and built window frames from salvaged pine. Walter helped run conduit despite everyone reminding him he was not officially part of the electrical crew. Bonnie chose curtain fabric. Miriam tested every cabinet latch in the kitchen. Martin Quillen appeared on the second Saturday. He stood outside the construction fence, wearing an old brown work jacket and carrying a tool belt that looked newly purchased. Northridge had terminated his employment after the audit confirmed repeated policy violations under his supervision. No criminal charges had been filed against him, though civil proceedings and administrative reviews continued. Hollis met him near the gate. "What do you want? To help?" "That is not an answer." Martin looked toward the half-finished rooms. "I cannot change what happened." "No, I know how that sounds." "Then do not say it as though the next sentence will improve it." Martin's face tightened, but he did not leave. Cora approached from the garage carrying a box of door hinges. She looked at Martin, then at the unused tool belt. "You know how to hang a door? I can learn." "Good." She placed the box in his arms. "You begin with the bedroom doors. Someone else checks everyone before the room opens." Martin nodded. Cora did not forgive him. She gave him work that could be inspected. For several weeks, Martin installed frames, sanded rough edges, and corrected mistakes when Silas pointed them out. No one asked him to speak at meetings. No one treated his labor as repayment sufficient to cancel what he had done. He returned anyway. By October, legal outcomes began to arrive. Parnell Transit lost its county contract after transportation investigators found repeated misclassification of vehicles and incomplete passenger records. Bright Basin Lodge lost authorization to receive vulnerable adults after auditors documented false room claims and missing follow-up reports. 2 managers faced investigation for billing fraud. Other cases remained civil or administrative. Some employees were disciplined. Some resigned. Some insisted they had followed every instruction given to them. Not every missing animal was found. Bonnie never located Marbles. A rescue several counties away had records resembling the cat's description, but the dates did not match closely enough. Walter recovered his cattle dog after Iris traced a temporary foster record. Another resident learned that her dog had been adopted legally after she had signed a form she did not remember signing. The truth did not return everything. The new system could only stop certain losses from being repeated. Gale's legal notice period ended in early autumn. Animal control found no registered owner, breeder record, or missing animal report. Cora's statement in North Ridge documents established that she had been Gale's primary caretaker after June's death, but no formal ownership paperwork had ever been completed. The county allowed Cora to sign a transfer of interest before Hollis submitted the adoption application. They met at Iris's clinic. Gale was nearly a year old by then, long-legged and strong through the chest. His winter coat had begun to thicken around the neck. The right ear stood straight. The tip of the left still leaned outward when he relaxed. Cora read every line of the transfer form. Hollis waited. "You know I am not doing this because I stopped loving him," she said. "I know I could take him." "Yes. Do you believe that?" Hollis looked at Gale, who was lying between their chairs with one paw resting over the stolen left glove. "Yes," Cora signed. "I spent too much of my life needing an animal to keep me alive," she said. "He deserves to grow without believing that is his job." Hollis signed the adoption papers afterward. The clerk stamped them, copied them, and slid the originals into an envelope. The paper did not feel like ownership. It felt like a list of obligations: food, medical care, safety, identification, responsibility if Gale caused harm, a legal promise to answer for the life now entrusted to him. Hollis preferred it that way. The facility opened in November under a 72-hour emergency warming permit. Longer stays required referral to housing services and formal review. The fire marshal tested every alarm. The health inspector checked the kitchen. Iris inspected the animal rooms twice and rejected one drain cover before approving it. No ribbon was cut, Cora said. Scissors near an open doorway made her nervous. Silas mounted the wooden sign above the entrance instead. Temporary shelter, no one has to leave anyone behind. He had carved the letters by hand. The spacing was not perfect. No one suggested replacing it. The following winter arrived beneath a clear morning sky. Snow fell slowly, bright against the dark pines, and remained clean along Winter Street for nearly an hour before tires marked it. Gale had grown into a lean, powerful German shepherd. The honey-gold fur across his chest had deepened while the uneven black saddle still dipped lower along his left side. He was not a police dog. Hollis had never trained him to search, track, or confront. At the shelter, Gale moved according to his own judgment. Some evenings he lay in the common room while residents played cards. Other nights he chose the quiet office near the rear exit. No one was permitted to call him over repeatedly or place an arm around him for comfort. When Gale approached, the choice belonged to him. One evening, Hollis was completing an intake inventory at the station when 3 knocks sounded from the shelter entrance. The rhythm stopped him, not because it felt supernatural, because memory sometimes recognized sound before reason did. Gale rose from beside the desk. Together they crossed the yard. An elderly man stood beneath the shelter light with a canvas backpack over one shoulder. His name was Otis Claiborne. He had a narrow face, a white beard that had not been trimmed in months, and a coat patched at both elbows. Beside him stood a thin hound with cracked paws and snow gathered along its spine. Otis remained outside. Someone at the truck stop said this place takes dogs. It takes people, Hollis said. Dogs can come with them. Otis looked toward the animal rooms visible beyond the hallway. They do not make you give them up? No. What if he barks? We find out why. What if someone is afraid of him? We arrange space. Otis kept one hand around the backpack strap. What if I cannot stay long? It is temporary. The word no longer sounded like a threat to Hollis. It sounded like honesty. Otis looked down at the hound. I was told there were conditions. There are. Hollis opened the door wider. You read them inside, where it is warm. No one signs tonight. Gale stepped forward. The hound lowered its head, uncertain. Gale sniffed the air, then moved sideways and left the threshold open. He did not pull toward the stranger or block the entrance. After several seconds, the hound crossed first. Otis followed. Inside, the shelter carried the smell of soup, clean laundry, and wet dog fur. Cora stood near the stove, arguing with Martin over whether the soup needed more salt. Martin held the spoon but did not appear to have been granted authority over it. Brooke sat at the end of the table, completing a report. Mabel divided a loaf of bread into uneven pieces. Marion spoke quietly with a woman near the window. The room was not peaceful, it was alive. Hollis saw the wedding photograph on the shelf near the office door. He had brought it from the station months earlier and finally placed it upright. Elowen smiled at something beyond the camera. Hollis stood beside her, looking serious enough to guard the church. He no longer saw her as the person who would have known exactly what to do. Elowen had helped create something hopeful. She had missed dangers. She had begun asking questions. She had died before the answers came. The unfinished work did not make her a failure. Nor did continuing it make Hollis her replacement. Otis knelt beside his hound while Cora brought water. Gale watched from several feet away, then turned and carried Hollis's left glove beneath the kitchen table. Hollis let him keep it. Outside, snow continued falling over Winter Street, the police station, and the old garage no one had wanted. The door at the end of the street no longer belonged to the officer with the keys. It did not belong to the woman whose words had inspired the sign. It did not belong to the dog who had once arrived half frozen in someone else's arms. It belonged for a little while to whoever still stood outside the cold, carrying something they refused to abandon. Sometimes love is not proven by how tightly we hold on, but by whether the people and animals beside us are still free to choose us. A safe place is more than a locked door, a signed form, or a warm bed. It is a place where dignity remains intact, where no one must abandon what they love just to survive. In our own lives, may we have the courage to ask before deciding for someone else, and the grace to leave room for trust to grow. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about loyalty, compassion, and the quiet choices that change lives. May God give you wisdom to protect without controlling, and peace enough to keep your door open.